two levels of misinformation. One is just wrong facts, and the other one is to mix facts and beliefs together. So I think it would be helpful to take out the ideology out of the ideas.
I love the idea of like finding these underlying ideologies, these sort of religious concepts, if you will, and go, oh, this has been operating under the surface in my mind for years, and I didn't even know it. And that's what's filtering the data in a particular pattern. Kind of like having magnets. I think there's an image of like sand gathering in a particular way through a glass thing, because magnets are sort of orienting what can filter through in a certain way, and that's kind of what our minds are doing with the data. And of course, once we get to your level, someone who's really an expert in medical science and studies for a living, studies viruses or vaccines and other medical things, then we begin to have enough context to know that that's not working.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and we begin to even pluck up some of these ideologies that before were just unconscious. It becomes maybe clear that this is a bias, this is a way that my mind keeps skewing the information.
And to me, there is a problem today with predators. I call them predators, the people that intentionally spread false or partial truths as very well established truths to suit their own purposes. And my often advice is follow the money. Where are these people's interests in? Why are they so interested in you mistrusting science or established medical knowledge or history even, just for suit an agenda that seems to be very narrow and very, very limited in scope, and very shallow, based on really shallow foundations. I would love to talk to one of these people that kind of denies COVID, one of these so-called experts, to discuss vaccines or discuss medical research or discuss COVID or HIV. Take one objectively and see where we overlap and where we actually have dissonance. I don't find anyone that is willing to confront themselves with a different reality. That is what is very frustrating. It's like there is no space for an open discussion. Either you function into your own resonance chamber and you believe everything that you need to believe 100%, or you are on the other side. There is no space for integration and overlap.
It's sort of like an addictive habit, perhaps, of distrusting all authority, distrusting all of reality, kind of wanting to see the whole wall come down.
Right.
Like, oh, look, there's a crack right there, and I see another crack there. It's like,
right.
There are cracks. There are cracks.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we have biases which warp reality a little bit all the time. So, of course, we're not in the truest reality at any given moment. But we go after those cracks, not expecting it to be a huge super hole. We analyze the cracks and see how deep does this crack go.
Right.
But every crack, like looking for every crack to completely demolish the entire wall, that's not practical. Because the wall's been standing for a long time.
Well, reality is driven by perception. Perception is also driven by belief to a certain extent. I think that we are now in a situation where we are pursuing a form of fundamentalism. And maybe it is a reaction to another form of fundamentalism, which is, the kind of blinded belief in pharmaceutical medicine, for instance, or Western science, with no question, right? And then probably the big disappointment that came when the promise of Western science of curing cancer or making life better for everybody didn't quite materialize. And then going into the other side of disbelieving Western science, but on a wholesome perspective, which is then disregarding essentially any history of progress, scientific progress that we have made over the last 4,000 years.
This is one of the biggest threads, I think, because there is this sort of religious trust in technology to be the universal savior, to solve all of our problems. And
Which is not.
It's not doing it. In many cases, we have failed. But again, for us to look at this failure, it means it's all a lie. That's fundamentalism. That's leapfrogging to an extreme.
And that's my big issue. I believe in integration. I believe that a lot of the science that we don't know yet is expressed in tradition and metaphysics, for instance. But I also believe that the science that we know to be true, it is true. So there is truth. It might not be the whole truth. It might not be the complete and infallible truth, but it's a form of truth on which we can rely so far. People tend to believe obvious lies and kind of completely objectable facts rather than what history, experience, and knowledge we carry with us and we carry from our ancestries, have taught us, and say, no, all that we learn doesn't count. All that, we need to exclude massive sections of our knowledge base in order to believe certain facts, which is very, very bizarre.
It's fascinating, right? Have you ever been in a cult? Have you ever been indoctrinated?
No.
And that's probably why it's so fascinating to you, because people who have been in cults and gotten out of them recognize, I think, the pathway.
Right.
And this is kind of what this is, and it's not to shame anybody. It's like I think that the psychological circuitry for joining a cult is the same circuitry for having an epiphany. It's like breaking out of a mesmeric reality, going, oh my God, I didn't realize I was completely wrong. Like all that I've been taught is a lie. Like that's an exciting thing, and to let go of everything you've known is this like leaping off point. It's like you're leaping off the cliff. Incredible bravery it takes to be willing to see things differently, to look at a whole different reality, which can cause psychological change if you've been stuck for a long time. I mean, I think some of us are just propelled to this. I do this on a regular basis, so it's not as dramatic as if I joined a cult and chose to reject all of my former reality for this particular group's reality. I just do it on my own. I'm like, oh my God, that's such an incredible idea that shatters all of my notions of this. And then I kind of come back to go like, okay, it didn't shatter everything. It just shattered this one idea here. Like, all right. So but I allow myself that moment of abandon, of just abandon in the excitement of the discovery. What I think becomes addictive for people is if the discovery is so important to their sense of identity or their sense of tribe or their sense of, escaping the problems that were in their old reality.
I think that's a lot to that.
Yeah, then it's like it's got binding power psychologically, and there's no way they're going to let it go.
To be alone and to be able or having to, find your own way and kind of go through trial and error, it's very frightening. I think there is a lot of fear, and I think that, fear is also what really triggered what happened with COVID and with the situation that we've been living, around social instability, political instability, ideology, fear of death or disease. I think that there is a lot of fear around that, and a huge amount of sadness, a huge amount of trauma that is not being resolved and is not being addressed. But, walked around constantly, you know, and that's why also a lot of, you know, people I know move from practice to practice, right? So this is the solution, and they go 100% into that, and then there is another practice, and then there is another practice. So first is yoga, and then meditation, and then, you know, people do like 9 hours of meditation a day, and it's still not giving the resolution. Then you go into plant medicine, and it's still not perfect. So you kind of circle back, and you start doing all of those things again, and you keep going, you know, until you find the answer. Whereas for me, you know, the answer is, there isn't an answer. There isn't a final answer. Everything is moving. Everything is movable. There's no
silver bullet,
and there is no finish line.
And I think this again brings me back to psychology and really neurobiology, is that the most fundamental aspect of the brain's agenda is to conserve glucose.
Right.
So it's constantly looking for an end of process. Okay, what thinking answer can get me so I don't have to think anymore about this? So I can just end process.
Right.
And that's not life. That's death. If you really think about it deeply enough, having all the answers means either you are from God's perspective, or you're dead. Like you're not engaged in the discovery anymore. So if you're really a thinker, you're not going to be ever satisfied with an answer that answers everything. You'll keep looking for that answer, that truth, but you'll never stop because you know you don't have it all.
Right.
And that's like enlightenment itself. The pursuit of enlightenment itself. If you ever get there, it's a dead end.
Well, that's why I laugh sometimes, and that's why I became a little bit disaffected from the spiritual or healing community, because there is almost this kind of competition about who's more enlightened, right?
I have less of an ego than you.
Yeah, I can do this for, and to me, that's like so ridiculous, because on my journey, and maybe I'm on a completely wrong journey, right? But on my journey, over my 55 years of life so far, the only thing I discovered is that every step I take, there is another question to be answered. From any question that I answer or partially answer or help answering, there are another 10 questions that come up. And that is on a personal level, that is a professional level, that is in relationships. And it's hard. But unfortunately, that's how it works, at least in my experience.
Yeah, life is hard.
Life is hard.